going to share screen.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ecopsychology Café. Hello, my name is Carol Cozio, and I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, the host of this series. Monica Dragoz and I co-created this program. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I live in the traditional territory of the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people under the treaties of peace and friendship. I offer gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who live here now and who have lived here for thousands of years, for the legacy of caring for the land, water, fire, and air. I acknowledge the many creatures and living beings whose habitat was here and is here today. I acknowledge the ongoing impacts of colonization and systemic oppression of the people and the land on which we reside. Today, I'll be in conversation with Daniel Schwab, who has 15 years of experience as an urban planner in Germany and the US, and over 20 years doing contemplative practices in nature. He has a master's in urban and regional planning from the Technical University of Berlin and has offered transformative place-based education programs for ecological living at Schumacher College in the UK. Welcome, Daniel. Thanks for taking the time to share with us today. The airwaves are yours.
Okay, thanks, Carol. So you can hear me, yes? And you can see my
Yes.
show. So I would like to just invite this to be a conversation as much as you would like. If you have a question, I will try and formulate what I'm showing as an invitation, because I'd like to really open up a space here and after this meeting to think about and learn and develop this idea that ecopsychology has a space and a relevance for where we live. So I will start with what we think of as being the general, most accessible, idea of ecopsychology, which is we benefit from nature. We're connected to nature, and we need it, and we have a responsibility to it as well. So this is, I'm sure you all know this, and at the same time, ecopsychology, I think, is at this point really well theorized. Andy Fisher and David Kidner, these two books on the left, they do a really fantastic job of spelling out the terrain of ecopsychology. But what is still to be done, and what I'm trying to do, which is this book on the right, this is my master's thesis, and I'm working on still, is this idea that the city can be described and can be thought about and developed as something that ecopsychologists are concerned with. I would venture to say that none of us live in the wilderness. We live in the built environment. We live in places that are shaped by people. But we have a language for talking about our connection to nature and our connection to naturalness. And the built environment is the place where this can be realized. So ecopsychology, this is drawing mostly on Andy Fisher, is a psychological intervention that is meant to connect people with nature and their own naturalness, to flesh out this continuum. It's experientially based, transformative, and phenomenological. So it's discrete from other modes of inquiry, that it's not empirically based, it's not technocratic, and I would also say it's not aligned with capitalism. It's very clearly radical in that way. And that's the tradition that I'm following. That's basically what Andy Fisher has developed. He also talks about the natural to nature as having a very complex and multifaceted definition. It includes the natural world, but it also includes something like the nature of things, the way things are, reality itself, and also spirit or the life force. Those things bind us to it. They're present in us. So they provide this sort of language of continuity between self and nature. So finding yourself in nature, again, this is very typical ecopsychology, coming home, slowing down, acceptance, overcoming alienation, remembering who you are, being healed. This is the kind of processes that we experience often in nature, which is fantastic. But what about the built environment? What slide comes next? I don't even know. So I think my sense is that every environment, no matter where you are, presents itself to you. It is a totality that is in your awareness. It surrounds you and it says, this is the world. This is what you are. This is what life is about. Wherever it is, whatever you're surrounded by. And I'm trying to get to the next slide. So what is this place? Who are you in this place? This is my daughter in the little green dress. Almost 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But this is the world that she grew up in, and I would say there are no trees, there's no natural world, but there is a sense of naturalness in what she is able to experience and what her life is able to accomplish in this moment. There's human interaction. There's the magic of the bubbles. There's music. There's this whole world of liveliness. And this is, for me, where we can start thinking about the built environment and how it responds, how we respond to it, and how it responds to us, how it shapes our consciousness. For me, nature, ecopsychology is about experiencing the wholeness and the continuity and the contact with nature. And so the degree that an environment can make me, or it can allow humans to experience that wholeness, that's a positive, that's a nature supporting environment. This is a painting from, I've forgotten what it's called. That city that was Vesuvius sunk the city in ashes. What was the city? Forgot it. So this is a very old painting. It's been survived thousands of years, and it's painted on the wall of this city that was sunk in ash. But nature is present there in this picture, right? So it's like there's this self and nature and the built environment, they're not separate. So we experience ourselves in nature. That's what we're able to experience. We experience nature in some way, but we're always there. And this is a picture of, I think it's the Thames River around 1900. So this is one experience. It's like, yeah, the natural world is there and the human world is there, and they're intertwined in this beautiful way. This is the way that we experienced nature in this particular setting. Nature is about being in the cosmic flow. So time, this is an ancient Roman column. So a good built environment, as well as the natural world, it connects you to the past and the future, to the eternal, to the now, to that which flows. So time is a really important aspect of connecting to nature. Nature is food. It nourishes us literally and figuratively. And again, different environments bring nourishment to us in different ways. This is from a Time Life 1970s cookbook about English cuisine. And here these children they live in a village, and they've just gone down to the local dock and they're getting their fish. And this is the way that they're interacting with the world. And So it's informing. It's informing and it's enriching and enlivening and nourishing. I don't know if you know this concept, but I think it's a really great concept that Andy Fisher touches upon, but I wanted to draw it out, which is the idea of the focal thing. And a focal thing, for example, the dining table is something that has a lot of different ways that it connects. The focal thing, the dining table is not just what you put your food on, but it's where the family gathers. It's where you exchange. It's where there's a kind of a holy moment. So the focal thing is a way of thinking about a human object that nourishes us in all these and connects us, whatever that language of ecopsychology is, in all these different ways. And a good built environment has the aspects of a focal thing. Is another ecopsychological concept. Oops. What does it say under there? Life is a meaning-making journey, right? This is part of what life is about. We learn to make meaning and going into nature, but also dealing with interacting directly with human nature and interacting with the elements of culture like music, theater, dance, poetry. They connect us and they give life meaning. And so the built environment, again, is the place where this happens. The string quartet is not out in the middle of wilderness, but they are connecting with something deeply natural about humanity and something transcendent, both in terms of what music means, but across years and centuries, playing Beethoven. So I'm trying to just draw this line to say that ecopsychology is connected in all these different ways to the human and to different aspects of the things that humans create. So I said this at the beginning, but we need an ecopsychology of cities, I think, because most people live there, because cities shape our everyday psyche and our environmental relations, and because we need to be able to talk about how cities can be more or less natural. There's a fair amount of literature on this from urban planners who don't know anything about ecopsychology. So they're speaking the language of ecopsychology without really realizing. So happy city is one idea that, of course, okay, go into nature to meditate, to achieve some sense of peace, some happiness. But there's a whole literature of this in the city. Cities for people. Well, who else might they be for? Well, most cities are not for people. Cities are built for cars. That's one of the main things. And they're built for capital accumulation so that people can get rich, right? So so Jan Gehl is an urban planner from Denmark and talks about cities for people. The language of ecopsychology can bring this whole richness of dimension to this idea. He does a great job, but again, I think that ecopsychology can interpret these ideas even more fully. The soft city. There's this quote, I think, from Mary Oliver about the animal nature of the self, that you have to make yourself vulnerable in order to come into contact. And this idea is explored in the idea of the soft city, that you can create places where people can actually meet, where they can have meaningful, fleshy exchanges with reality. Expanding circles of participation is another idea from Andy Fisher. Here's an environment, where people can meet across ages, across experience. They can engage with all kinds of different experiences. Some with the natural world. This is on an island. Some, there's the hills, there are the trees, but there's also the human, and those things interact and intertwine. I kind of feel like I'm running out of time. How long what time is it?
You can keep going if you want, Daniel. I think we'll still have some time for discussion.
Okay, so here are a couple of, more just pictures of the built environment. Most of them are from Germany, some from Italy. This is a great book on bicycling, and I want to say that for me, bicycling and walking are the two modalities that we have of interacting with the world. Right? Walking is the primary way that we move about the world, and bicycling is this amazing mechanical way that allows us to engage in the world in a particular way. Here's my daughter at age 2 when we lived in Germany. Because I think I'm speaking mostly to a North American audience. For me, living in Germany opened up this whole world of the way that children are able to interact with the physical world. And in this picture, she's got she used to ride on the front of my bike in exactly the same way that the teddy bear is riding on front of this bike. So for her, there's this connection, and it gave her all this freedom. So the city can be this place when it is structured in a particular way that allows people of even the youngest age to engage with the world, which is for me what the core of ecopsychology is. That author from 2 slides back who wrote the book about German bicycling, she talks about kinetic delight, the way of being able to connect and have this kind of joyous experience of interacting with the world through bicycling. So those are kind of a few images. Now we're on to chapter 2. So if you think about or feel into this kind of experience, what kind of experience is it in your body, in your mind, in your soul? What about this? Is it the same experience? Maybe it's, I don't know. Does it feel different? I wanted to, okay. So again, on the other side, looking at the world of cars, the world of the parking lot, there is a literature which I think can be connected to ecopsychology. This book, as far as I know, doesn't exist in English, but the title is clear. The car, according to this traffic planner from Vienna, he calls it a virus. And a virus is something that carries disease. And the subtitle here is The History of a Destruction. This is the professor. He invented this thing called the Gehzeug, or the walkmobile. And he would walk around in Vienna with this thing that is meant to simulate how much space a car takes up in the urban, in the world, the physical world. So he walked around to show the kind of preposterous nature of carrying around an engine, 4 car seats, blah, 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 all this metal, computer stereo, it's all right, and it's cluttering up the environment. Another impact of the car, so what I'm getting at here is that the car, there are lots of ways to talk about the built environment, but the car is a very complex way in which our environmental relations are profoundly altered. And these books are two books that talk about aspects of that. Place and Placelessness is about how the whole notion of place, that we are in a place at all, kind of disintegrates. And that we end up being in placeless places. James Howard Kunstler, the book on the right, is an American, and he talks about the geography of nowhere. It's just what happens when you're in a parking lot. It's just a nowhere. It's not even a place. It's just a nowhere. Like in his view. Windshield wilderness, this is relevant for, I was thinking of Monica, because this is close to, you live close to Washington. This is about the national parks in Washington, but it applies to the American approach to the national parks, which was that the national parks are meant to be experienced from inside a car. You're supposed to sit in the car and drive through them and see them through the windshield. Right? So this is the way that, that you interact with the world in the world of cars, is obviously through the windshield, right? So this, what does this mean for ecopsychology? How can ecopsychology make sense of this? Copenhagenize is a company, but it's a group of people that are trying to draw attention to the way that we interact with places, and especially bicycling. And it shows a history of traffic planning. This is the way that people used to move through. I don't know if my cursor is visible, but on the left, people used to walk in a straight line. They used to ride their horses in a straight line. And then came the streetcar in 1900. Mostly still the same. There were bicycles in addition. Then the car started to come in around 1920, curving around. And then what happened was the car got priority and everything else became fragmented. So when you think about, depending on where you live, your capacity to go somewhere, to use your legs, which are your nature-given way of moving and experiencing the world, it's on the verge of impossible in some places. And you certainly can't go in a straight line, depending on where you live, or the distances is just inconceivably big. And so again, the car as an object of ecopsychological analysis becomes really important. So what does the car do to the fabric of life? Oh, sorry, there's one thing wrong with my slideshow.
Daniel?
Yeah, shall I
I'm
stop?
just, you know, we're just at 11, so you decide how much time you still
Yeah,
want to.
so I mean, I'm basically, that's it, that's it. You know, this is the question, you know, what is the question? Why are parking lots depressing? So I can give an answer, but I think that everybody has also an answer, or maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, so there, thank you very much. I'll turn this off. I'll turn it off.
Thanks, Daniel.
Can you switch off the screen to sharing? Stop share. Okay, thank you very much.
Super, thank you.
Pompeii, yeah, that's right.
I'm wondering, Daniel, do you want people to answer that question? Like, why are parking lots?
What should we do? How can we have, yeah, if you want, or if you have another question, go for it.
State the question again, please.
Why are parking lots depressing? But
do you think
you don't have to go ahead? I'm just open to whatever conversation flows.
Do you think they're depressing?
Yes, I think they're depressing.
And by depressing, they make us depressed. Yeah. If you could expand on what that means for you, yeah.
My theory is if you go and hang out in the car park at some point you're going to just you will get depressed. So, and then the question is, what's going on? What's that about? Or try it out. Let's meet next week. Go and spend an hour in a car park and come back and tell me how it was. I mean, I can tell you my thoughts, but I'd rather see what else comes up first.
I can share some thoughts, as I've thought about this a lot. For me, a parking lot is symbolic of our destruction and overrun of nature in industrial society. So it is both symbolic and invokes this sense of loss and longing. But then it also is a reminder, then once I'm sitting with the loss and recognition of that, like, what is it that we're missing? And it's all the beings that would be in that space, we hadn't paved over it, right? Like that ecosystem that existed. And so then I often find myself going down a path of like, well, where are they now? Are they simply gone, or have they been displaced? And then it ends up mirroring what is happening in the city as well, right? With displacement of humans as we continue to evolve our cities in ways that are not for the benefit of humans or nature. So that's kind of some thoughts.
I've got this random thing, if I can share. I was thinking of your this before. Like, there's a smell of tarmac. Is that word in America? The smell of when tarmac gets hot in the sunshine, and I really like it. Randomly, it really reminds me of my granddad's shed. So in a car park, it sometimes that smell pops up, and I really like it. And it also randomly kind of takes me to, so funny you had Pompeii, because it randomly makes me think of volcanoes as well, and just that part of Earth, you know. So I don't know. So for me, that kind of takes me into a kind of anti-stereotypical aesthetic appreciation of a car park. Yeah, in a random way. So yeah.
Funny you mentioned the sense of smell triggering that, Eugene. For me, as soon as you said it, the image came up. And I used to live in Wisconsin. I grew up there and spent more than 40 years of my life there. And I love to fish and hike and hunt. And so anyway, very frequently up there, a railroad track was the entrance into a wilderness area. You know, if you didn't have roads or something, there might be a railroad going. And you take the railroad because you want to get to this river where you can fish. And of course, there's a trestle over it. And the trestles of a small stream would be made of timbers. And the timbers were saturated with creosote, you know, to preserve them. And so I can remember, it's just like you said, tarmac smell. Remember, you get to the stream because the trestle's going over, and on a warm day, that pungent odor of creosote comes up. But it's not an unpleasant memory because there was a stream under there, and there were fish in it, and I had a rod and some lures, and was heading out to that. El Paso, where I live, is it's not enormously populated, it's an enormously large urban area, one of the largest in the country. It's 45 miles from one end of the city to the other. I went to testify last night at a Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for the renewal of a permit of a refinery here, which is our largest single point pollution. It was 18 miles to get over, and it's still in the city. 18 miles from my house. I was at this on the east side of town. I live on the west side. It's a long way. It's a long way to go. It makes public transit here is very difficult. We have a good bus company. Doesn't run at night, I don't think. I don't think I've ever taken it. I mean, it could take a couple hours to get somewhere. So I can hop in my car and I can get over it. I mean, it would take me hours to have got over there and probably plenty of walking too, which wouldn't be bad. But my car got me there in a half hour. To me, the automobile symbolizes individual freedom of movement. So, you know, the hot town, we would starve to death here if we didn't have cars. You know, my grocery store, my nearest one, is about 1.5 miles from here. It's downhill and then uphill. I could walk to that. It would probably do me good. But it would be impossible to live without a car. And I see when you show those photos of those lovely old European cities, you know, with 4-story apartments, everybody living cheek by jowl. New York City, for example. You know, you can get around on mass transit. There's subways and trolleys and buses. And it's probably more convenient than getting around in a car because you don't have to worry about parking. But I mean, Carol, I think where you live, I mean, you even bought a truck to get out to your little island there. We're kind of stuck with it. What I said at this environmental, if I can, at this permit renewal for the refinery, was that until we can figure out how those little gray guys got all the way from Zeta Reticuli to Roswell, New Mexico on 1 tank of gas, we're stuck with gas. I mean, I looked out in the parking lot, there weren't that many Teslas out there. And even if there were, the people there who live in that area can't afford a Tesla. And even if they did, your Tesla is still going to be fueled by fossil fuel because that's where electricity comes from. So the question for me at that point, and what I proposed in my testimony, you know, was some steps the refinery could take, instead of just keeping it a steady level of emission, changing the mix. That was that the commission should require them to reduce emissions over a 5-year period and establish air monitoring stations. They have none in the footprint of the refinery, and then engage the medical center, which is also in the footprint of the refinery, and just start doing health assessments so you can track what the effects of that emissions are among the population who has the misfortune to live in the downwind. We're kind of stuck with it, you know.
But I think that where I'd like to maybe do some bridging with what you're saying with Daniel's presentation. And I think a question that popped up for me, and Daniel, you've mentioned your time in Germany a couple of times and showed some slides from there. I'm curious if you see more naturalness in some of those cities, like even like in Europe, in Germany. Just piggybacking a bit on what Jerry was pointing out, that I think is a bit of a phenomenon with North American cities. So I'm just curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I have kind of come to it feels kind of paradoxical that for me, in North America, which has all this wild nature, that the kind of cities that we have here are less natural than that European type of city, and that access to nature is in some ways more difficult in North America. And again, I'm talking about nature not in terms of just this wilderness experience, but like, for example, the picture of the 2 people facing each other on a bicycle. You know, the ability to have these kind of human to human exchanges is facilitated by a city in which people can walk. Walking is really the defining characteristic. You know, so walking, creating places where people can walk is the way that people can experience their own nature, their natural way of moving through the world, and their natural way of interacting with each other, which is face to face, as opposed to, you know, bumper to bumper, car horn to car horn. And So, yeah. But I'd like to hear other people's thoughts or questions or reactions to the slides. Or...
I have a couple of thoughts, just bouncing off of some comments here. I do think about density, population density as maybe something that might have a big impact on how we feel about car parks and infrastructure that supports cars. You know, in a city that's kind of like a sprawling city geographically that's less densely populated, I wonder if people might feel it less, like the impact of that of those infrastructures. But it just occurs to me thinking about sort of why car parks are depressing. I'm kind of wondering, are they more depressing in places where it'd be, for example, you know, helpful to have a park as a meeting place, for example, as opposed to an area in a densely populated city that only supports one function, which is to park cars and then go somewhere else. So I do wonder about that in more densely populated cities, whether people have less access to not only sort of a sense of space, but also if that space is taken up by, you know, structures that don't allow to connect with other people, then they're deprived of the, you know, the environment, the non-human nature and the human nature as well. And I could just see that sort of disconnection fueling, you know, stuff we think about in clinical psychology, you know, poor mood, lack of energy, disconnection, loss of meaning, that sort of thing. So I just want to thank you for the very interesting presentation. It's kind of making me think about different things here. Thanks.
Just building on what Thomas, sorry, can I go, Monica?
No, go ahead.
Yep, just building what Thomas said, what came to me is that I've had a lot of fun in parking lots at tailgate parties, so I'm not always depressed, right? There can be that social piece. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, that's very human-centric. It's for my feel-good, my socialization. What about everything else that we kind of tarmacked over to have this little brief moment? Because tailgate parties, they may be an hour or two, but it's certainly not like weeks at a time. And so I think about, Thomas, building on what you said about multi-purpose. How can we make parking lots more multi-purpose? They stand empty at nighttime and on weekends, perhaps, and maybe we can introduce some communal space or communal activities in there.
Well, I realize that your presentation is about more than parking lots, Neil. And I mean, I also, it's interesting that we're having this conversation about cars and parking lots, but what I've heard from people too around parking lots is that it's this association with other people in their lives, or in Jerry's example, like that portal into nature. It's not just the parking lot itself. Like, I think maybe Daniel, you're getting at the parking lot all on its own is kind of depressing, but other people through their senses have memory attached to something more natural in their lives, whether, Eugene, it's your relationship with your grandfather or something like that, right? So that's kind of what struck me about where we've been in this conversation.
I guess I'm really sensitive at the moment is just with my work around aesthetic judgments around places. So, and I noticed the images, you know, from me, what I saw in the images channel were the animation, like the lovely photograph of your daughter in the bubbles, like it was so animated and there was such life in that imagery. And then the parking lot, you know, it feels so lifeless. So there was something in the proposition around enlivenment or animation of a space versus not. But as an introvert, intense introvert, the parking lot, in a way, offered me space that maybe the Amsterdam or kind of close-knit environment kind of freaks me out a bit. And the other thing, I know I'm just riffing off your image, but the other thing is, as a psychotherapist, I feel, I guess I'm kind of attuned to being careful about the places we reject, um, and those wounded places on earth that we reject, and what happens in that rejection as opposed to the embracing of them, um, as well. And I think that is linked to the aesthetic thing of what we think is beautiful and what we think is acceptable and the environments we want to engage with as well. So I can't hand in heart say that I think the parking lot is depressing at the moment. I'm not sure though. Jury's out.
I was thinking, on a kind of a visceral level of why something would be, it's like, generally speaking, the parking lots, at least near me, are pretty grim. It's just everything's very gray. There's no color, there's no life except for, the obligatory like tree that they have to plant every other aisle, and they're usually half dead because they don't plant them right. And, but also that it's like a very transitory space. Like there's nowhere to sit. You can't just really stay there. Like you have to keep moving because you have to get out of the way of the cars, and like there's nowhere to just be. You know what I mean? You have to kind of be looking around you, making sure you don't get hit and passing through. But then on the flip side of that is, at least near me, the parking lots are where, I guess, because we don't have plazas. I'm in the suburbs of New York City, we don't have plazas for central gathering spaces. So the parking lots get turned into that. Like the farmer's market on Sunday is in the town municipal parking lot. That's where the church carnival, will set up, that sort of thing. So it kind of, on a temporary basis, can transition into a human space. Once you get all the cars out, you ticket them and you tow them and get them out of there, and then they turn it into a human space temporarily. And then once that's done, it kind of gets transitioned back to, this kind of sad, cracked pavements, sort of area. So it's kind of, I think a lot of time, or, public-private parking lot's a whole different thing, but I think the parking lots near us get utilized in a way, because that's what we have. You know what I mean? We don't have an alternative. We don't have a Piazza Navona to have, it's, we've got the town municipal parking lot on Main Street. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or making the best out of a bad thing. It's kind of,
Yeah. Right. So that is kind of a, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, or question. If you, when I think of, for example, in Venice, the St. Mark's Square, which is considered, one of the most amazing human achievements in the built environment. It's a place that, and you can take any, there are many squares and there are many places, but that you think about the human experience of being in the world, the beauty, the magic, the mystery, the love, the artistic accomplishment, right? And for my sensibility, I want to experience all of that. I want to experience the wonder of nature, which includes the wonder of human nature, the amazing art, the dance, the music, right? And so I want to have those kind of places. I want to be able to all the time to be in beautiful, amazing places that awaken me to the wholeness of human experience. Which, yeah, there's suffering and there's depression, but there's a lot of parking lots around here where I live, and there's not a lot of really inspiring places where I can, whether it's interact with the artwork or whether I can feel very, protected in a beautiful garden like situation where I can have an intimate conversation or whatever. There are so many experiences, and yeah, we can restructure the parking lot for a few hours to kind of make a makeshift situation, right? But what about like really having those kind of places, really developing, on a permanent basis? Then there's one other thing I wanted to say, which is about wholeness, and that we experience all the parts of our personality and life not in discrete boxes. Like, okay, now I'm I don't know. Now I'm consuming, now I'm producing, now I'm raising children, right? Like they're all in human experience, they're intertwined, right? But the parking lot is the kind of epitome of the single use, at least officially. It only has one use. There's only one thing you're really allowed to do in a parking lot under normal conditions. Maybe you'll tell me I'm wrong. Okay, feel free to tell me that I'm wrong. But the parking lot is for parking. And for me, that's to the degree that the environment is saying, this is what your life is about. Your life right now is just about parking. And then I'm thinking, well, what about the rest of me? Like, what about the desire for intimacy? What about the desire for celebration or for expression or whatever? Like, that's what for me is depressed in the parking lot. Now tell me I'm wrong.
You're making me think of graffiti art and murals. That I happen to live in a city where the city just decided, oh, there's people writing on walls. Let's just have a mural festival every year. And there's these dedicated spaces for muralists to practice their craft, so to speak, And I think about that as sort of like a slight shift that can make such a difference in terms of how we interact with what might be considered as sort of a depressing part of the environment. And it makes me want to ask if anyone knows of like similar initiatives with spaces like parking lots, like how to make parking lots into places of beauty or celebration or community or something like that. So that they're not this like single function thing, and clearly with what people have shared, I think there's potential for parking lots to have many positive associations. So it's almost like this untapped space or resource that could be transformed. I'm curious if you know of any initiatives to sort of make parking lots into a different kind of space, or if anyone has heard of anything.
I wish I did. I don't know of anything like that in cities that I've been in and around. I think that sounds great.
Well, I think as Alyssa said, they can be have an impermanent, they tend to be impermanent. There are various actions that people take, but
I do know of the city repair project in Portland, Oregon, and they actually painted intersections as a diversion to slow people down. So that's what came to mind when you asked the question about parking lots.
Yeah, that's the work of Mark Lakeman, an architect there, and you can check him out. He's got a YouTube channel, and I've tried to introduce some of his theories here without much success. But I think what you're using is you're saying the parking lot is like a symbol of how our life is compartmentalized. And someone was talking about, how we can integrate these components. Well, I did once. That's how I met Carol. And it was at an eco village. And I have to say, the 6 months I spent in that place, it was like they called it villaging. It really wasn't. But I mean, it's like, I had to admit, my life was not as compartmentalized because I did everything within like 100-foot radius, slept, my work. I worked in the office, and I kept the well logs and ran errands because I had a car. And you ate there, you slept there, your social life was kind of there. Even your spiritual life through various rituals that they organized around nature festivals and things like that. And that was all very nice. But it was also a nut house, and I eventually had to leave it. I spent another month at a place you might know, Findhorn, which is non-existent anymore in northern Scotland. And that was a little more orderly, and it was a little more settled, and people were older and everything else. But it's no more. They might have been very sustainable in terms of energy and water and growing their own food and recycling water. They wonderful job there. They even export energy, but they didn't survive COVID. The Findhorn Foundation is kaput. They're selling their big conference center, Clooney, and basically it's just going to become, a little town where people kind of live closely and close to nature.
So I guess
I don't know these things are sustainable, Daniel. I don't know.
Since we're sort of getting to the end, this has been a good conversation, and I think it is what I wanted to point to is that there is a big conversation that can go in many directions around where we live and how we can bring the language of ecopsychology to it. And I'd like to continue that, so to invite you to contact me I'd like to have some kind of a continuing interaction in terms of a course, or in terms of a regular meeting where we can start to flesh out and understand what does it mean? What can ecopsychology say about where we live and the spaces that we create? So.
Thank you, Daniel. And everyone will get a follow-up email with the replay link of this session, and Daniel's contact information if you'd like to carry on or get further information. And Christine, do you have your hand up? Nope, somebody had nope. Okay, no, she didn't. I saw a hand, or was our hand clapping? I don't know which one it was.
I think it was hand clapping.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So yes, thank you everyone for a really juicy conversation today. Very different, and I really enjoyed that. And watch for the email with the replay link and our upcoming events. And Daniel, do you have any last words of wisdom for us before we leave?
I don't know. I guess I would think about how can places allow you to be your natural self? And those might not be in the wilderness. They might be right where you are.
Super. Monica?
I'm good. Thank you to Daniel, and thank you to everyone who came and discussed and noshed on this today.
Good.
Thank you.
Next time you go to a parking lot, think about this conversation. There you go. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
If you want to hang out, Daniel, at the end, we can have a little chit chat.
William,
Can I have a debrief, Daniel?
lovely William.
He's my friend from Schumacher College.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Yeah. There was a parking lot story at Schumacher College,
Oh,
wasn't there? Daniel probably remembers.
I don't know. What's the story?
They had parking lots